Hi guys, it's Machaela and welcome back to my channel and welcome to my birth story. Finally getting around to it. But before we get into it, I do videos focusing on beauty and lifestyle, and I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button down below if that is something that you would be interested in. But let's go ahead and start with my earliest labor symptoms. So I was out and about doing one of the activities with one of my kids. This was 2 days, well, a day and a half before I actually had him. And I remember sitting down and feeling what I felt like were real contractions. And they were very distinct from the Braxton Hicks that I had been getting my whole pregnancy. Keep in mind that this is not my first baby, so I have been through this before, so I know a little bit more of what to look for. But I'm no expert. You kind of have to decide for yourself what contractions feel like. So I did that, and then I really didn't think much of it the rest of the day. I really didn't think of anything, just kind of went about my day like normal. This was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by that point, after I was done, we went home, proceeded the evening like normal. And then we went to bed that night, and I remember waking up constantly, tossing and turning like I was having contractions, and I felt that exact same way before in my previous pregnancy, and so I knew it was contractions. So I woke up the next day, I told my husband, like, I think there's some early labor symptoms going on, but not to worry. We're probably fine for at least another couple of days, and this was about a week before my due date, so I really didn't think much of it. And then so I got up, went about my morning routine. About 10 o'clock, I had been feeling some contractions all morning, very light, very mild. I had gone to the bathroom about 10 o'clock, and I had noticed my bloody show, and that's when I knew that I was in labor. So at that point, I didn't decide that it was time to go to the hospital yet. My contractions were still very mild. I had called my husband, and I had called my mom, and I said, okay, you know, this is happening. Probably gear up to have a baby this week sometime. And at this point, we're thinking, okay, like 2 or 3 days from now. So again, just going about my morning, having contractions, trying to do as much as of my daily routine as possible. But that whole day, I just kind of felt out of it. I felt very much like not beyond my ability to do things, but like the kind of feeling of I wouldn't want to be out and about right now and be doing stuff, but the kind of feeling that I can still do stuff while I'm at home, kind of like that happy medium. So that lasted for a few hours. My grandma came over for a little while. I had told her, and at that point she was like, yeah, you're in labor, just plan on having this baby today. So she was prepared to do what she had to do in terms of helping me with the kids. So after that point, the family knew, everybody knew that I was in labor, and at that point it really wasn't even a question. It wasn't a matter of if, it was more of a matter of when I go to the hospital at that point. So again, my mind was still on at least the next day, or maybe even the day after. By that point, we're probably more thinking about the next day. I went all day, I labored at home all day with my kids. My mom had come over in the afternoon, hung out with the girls. We all just kind of did our routine. The girls went to hang out with them for a little while. This was at this point about 5 o'clock. So once my mom took the girls, they wanted to go hang out with grandma for a little bit. So I decided, I'm like, okay, you know what, contractions are still very mild, but they're there. Like, I was contracting, there was no doubt. They just weren't beyond the point of being able to talk and do things through them, at least not at that point. But after the girls had gone to hang out with my parents for a little while, and I got a little bit of time to myself, I decided to take a shower. I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to relax, I'm going to rest, I'm going to call it a little bit of an early night, and just be for the rest of the day. Thinking that we're not having this baby till at least the next day. My husband had already planned on taking the next day off, and coming, and he planned on taking the rest of the week off, even if we didn't have the baby at that point, at the very latest, it was going to be within that week. So he just planned on taking a few extra days off and tacking that onto his paternity leave. And because I knew I was at the point where I didn't want to, I wanted help with the kids at the very least while I labored at home for as long as possible. I took a shower and I tried to relax and I couldn't. I would toss and turn. I sat on the couch and then I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm going to see if I can get some rest before we have this baby. At this point, we were thinking the next day. So our timeline went from a couple days to the next day at this point, or at least my timeline did. But I could not get comfy. I got worse. The contractions kept picking up. Eventually, the girls came back home. My mom knew that she was more than likely going to be with the girls, at this point, getting the girls at any point now. So she was all ready for them, prepared. So she had left. And then about, I want to say an hour later, I called her and I'm like, Mom, these contractions are really hurting. Should I call the hospital? She didn't really know what to say. So I decided that I was going to call the hospital. My husband was still at work at that point. So I called them and they were telling me, they were like, okay, well, I can't decide for you because I'm not you. But, I was telling them all my symptoms and I think my water had been breaking throughout the day. I didn't experience a huge gush throughout the whole day since I lost my mucus plug. I felt like I constantly had to pee and that it wasn't easy and that there was fluid constantly going out of me and I could never ease my bladder. And which by that point I had called labor and delivery and they're like, yeah, I think it's your water. You might want to consider coming down here soon. It was a little bit of a drive, nothing too intense, but enough to where it's like, okay, you should get down. Well, by the time I had called them, my contractions were about 4 minutes apart, they were at a point where they were painful and I needed help with my kids. And I did that. I called my husband because he still had to get off work. I said, okay, it's probably going to be another hour and a half. Called my husband, drop everything, come on, it's time to go. He was done. He was able to complete his workday successfully. So he didn't have to get off early. He just had to get home and, not sit and hang out or, just do some of his usual stuff. He couldn't really do his nighttime routine, which he already knew he wasn't going to. But I was in pain. I kept calling him like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Because the contractions were getting worse. And so the hospital had told me, okay, just get here as soon as possible. We'll have your spot. Call us when you're on your way down. So by the time he got home, showered, then we got the girls back to my parents' house. So we dropped them off, and by the time we actually got out the door, my contractions were 2 minutes apart. We do live in a place where we have to drive through canyons, so that was not so fun. But we were able to joke and laugh and kind of have fun in between contractions. It was probably about 9:30, 9:45 by the time we actually got to the hospital, and by that point my contractions were painful beyond talking or even breathing at that point. I had to kind of take the short, quick breaths and kind of whatever breaths I was able to manage, as long as I kept on breathing, which by this point I know keep on breathing, so I just kind of reminded myself, like, don't hold your breath in between contractions because it's too painful. So I did that, got to the hospital. They got admitted, but when I got there, I was only at a 4, so the nurses, I could tell, were stalling to keep me there, because they're like, we don't want you driving home and coming back because you're probably not going to make it, so we're just going to stall for time. So they had gotten a swab. They were like, okay, I want to see if you're leaking fluid, because that will be a sure indicator of you will be staying here and having this baby tonight, but they had already told me, we're not letting you go home. They were just stalling. About an hour later, fluid level, the swab came back. I tested positive for leaking out fluid. Probably not the right words, but I was leaking out fluid. There was confirmation. And at that point, I spent the rest of the night laboring at the hospital. I got to a point where, I'd get up, use the bathroom, try to eat some of it. The contractions were just so painful that I was screaming and crying and, like, grabbing my husband, holding him really tight, kind of scratching at him a little bit, like, just hold me, like, I would grab his sweater and hold on to it as tight as I could, not scratching at him, but, like, just grabbing at him. And then there was a point where I looked down on the floor. I was having a contraction. I looked down on the floor and I said, I am going to get on that floor. I was completely, at that point, out of my state of mind, and, like, my body just completely took over, and, like, I got on the floor. Next thing I know, I was on all fours and I was screaming in pain, and that was the only way that I really wanted to do contractions. And I did that for a while. At this point, timelines are completely over my head. I didn't know, didn't care. Fun fact though, my nurse there was also a doula. I don't really know the job description exactly, but a doula, but also a nurse at the same time. I don't know. But her plan was, okay, we're going to do this as naturally as we can. I want you to listen to your body. I'm not going to force you. And like the whole hospital experience was, I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. I'm going to support you in the way you want to do this. There was no pushing, no nothing, just absolute, this was such a good experience for me, giving birth where I did give birth at, just at the local hospital where I did all my OB appointments. So she didn't push a single thing. She supported me. After a while there, I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I just want the epidural. I'm tired. I want to try to rest because I knew the baby was coming soon, and by that point, I wanted to get a little bit of rest. And my husband had just gotten off long days of work, and all of a sudden, work to having a baby, that's a lot to do for somebody in one night. So I wanted him to get some rest. But of course, it took about 45 minutes for them to get there, get the epidural in. During that time, though, I was just in so much pain. I was just begging. I put it off until I couldn't handle the epidural or until I couldn't stand it anymore. And because I had just given birth, I still really remember what the birthing experience was like. And I'm like, I just don't want to feel these contractions this time around. It was cool doing it all natural one time, but I don't want to do it again and not so close. So at that point, my nurse had said, okay, we can give you fentanyl. It's safe for the baby. We've never had a problem with it. And I'm like, okay, just do it, which kind of made me a little bit, at that point, it did make me a little bit loopy, but really didn't help much. It just kind of put me in a brain fog, which was really, really weird and probably not ideal. But, I mean, it at least helped take my mind off of it a little bit. And at that point, the anesthesiologist finally came in and gave me the epidural. And then so I had gotten on the bed, took a minute for the epidural to kick in. I was numb on one side, not on the other, so it really didn't work all that great. And by the time the epidural really started to actually take effect, I felt the urge to push. They told me, okay, you're at a 10. This was about 3 hours from the time we went to the hospital, so this was, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. I had him at 1:48 in the morning the following day, a.m., so middle of the night. And I told them I have to push. I'm feeling that urge to push. So I still felt everything. I had the epidural just long enough to take the edge off, so I didn't feel every single thing, but I definitely felt it enough to feel everything, just not at the intensity level of what I would have felt it if I didn't have the epidural. So it took the edge off. But I was still kind of in charge of, okay, I feel this urge. So they're like, okay, we got to get the doctor in. We got to get the doctor in now. And they were rushing to get the doctor in. And then they got to a point where they told me, again, totally great experience at this hospital, but, the doctors got to do what they have to do. They have multiple patients to take care of. So finally the doctor got in and the nurse was like, you need to not push. And I'm like, I'm pushing? Somebody better catch this baby. There was no stopping this baby at this point. So my husband got on the other side of me and he was prepared to catch the baby if he needed to. So the doctor geared up just in time. The nurses said, okay, just get on the side of her, support her, help her, whatever. I don't even know where he was at this point, just kind of sitting there looking at me, looking at the baby, being bored. But he was prepared to catch the baby. He was prepared to catch him if he needed to. And so the doctor got there just in time. They're like, okay, he's here. And he came. He was perfectly healthy. We did immediate skin on skin. They waited a while to get his weight and to get all the measurements. Obviously they made sure he was fine, healthy first. He did have a meconium, a bowel movement inside of me, so that was cause for a little bit of concern. But once he was out, they had notified whoever they needed to notify. But once he was out there, he said, he's fine, he's healthy, here's your baby. And at that point, we just kind of rested the rest of the night. They waited a long time to take the birth because I'm just, I was kind of telling them, I just want to hold him. he's resting. I want to rest. My husband obviously needs to rest. And they didn't push a single thing. They didn't do the wait right away. They probably waited about 4 hours, like until it was like early that morning. But yeah, we snuggled that whole morning. I mean, my husband didn't even hold him till it was daylight out, after they had gotten his birth weight and made sure he was all okay. After he had gotten on me, they measured him, they got his birth weight. He was 7 pounds and 6 ounces, so my biggest baby. And he was just so good, just so precious. And there's just something to be said about being in that hospital, holding your baby for the first time. And we really tried to take it all in, talking to family, FaceTiming family. But really, we just kind of sat and hung out like that entire next day. My husband finally got to hold him, did some skin on skin. He was on me the majority of the time, and we rested. He was, well, we rested. I was awake most of the time, but just because at that point I didn't, there was too much going on. I didn't want to rest. I wanted to sit and hold him and admire him, but I did get to rest. My husband did take him on and off so I can get some rest. Yeah, and I forgot to mention, but prior to having him, I had gotten the shakes really bad. I had gotten really nauseous. I mean, that's pretty standard procedure for having a baby. The adrenaline's so high, so I got really shaky to the point to where my husband was actually concerned. Nurses said it was fine. I was fine. I never threw up. I tried to throw up a few times, but I never threw up. But my whole body was just uncontrollably shaking. Again, perfectly normal. And this was prior to the epidural. Once I got the epidural, I was able to relax a little bit. I was able to relax. Well, not relax. I got the epidural and then I had to push before the epidural fully took effect. But I was shaking really bad before, for probably a good couple of hours between the time that I had gotten to the hospital and the time that I had gotten the epidural. I was shaking really bad. Again, normal. But talk to your doctor if you're concerned. I'm not a doctor. I just had a baby. But again, there's something to be said about that first 24 hours because it's so precious. It's so beautiful. Your baby is as small as you'll ever be. I mean, aside from that couple ounces they lose right after birth. But so small, so precious, so snuggly. Hung out, did skin on skin. Trying to make things as comfortable for him as we could because, again, to go from a cozy womb, every need is met without even having to think about it, and all of a sudden they're in the world, they're cold, they're hungry, they experience all these things for the first time, and it's hard. But it's so precious. Just the three of us, even before we brought him home, the three of us holding our baby for the first time, my husband and I just holding him for the first time, and we just sat there in awe, and we just stared at him, and we stared at this precious life that God had created and had given to us. And though my pregnancy was unplanned, and though it was a total surprise, and in the midst of some pretty crazy circumstances, he's our miracle baby, because we honestly, after my husband had his injury last year, he had a brain injury, I wasn't sure if we would have any more kids. But then he recovered completely, and he was able to go back to work. And at that point, I think it was pretty early on in his recovery that we had decided that we didn't want another baby. We were gonna wait, had other plans, and I couldn't have asked for more. I mean, this beautiful, precious baby. I mean, my whole pregnancy was kind of crazy. Just a lot of things we had gone through. A lot of just everything from feeling him early to, when I got in my car accident to I had a placenta tear. Actually, I had the placenta tear and then I got in the car accident. It felt almost like a little bit of a spiritual battle because it was, on one hand, I felt the baby. I felt him move at 8 weeks, just 8 weeks along. I cannot say that word, gestation. But 8 weeks along, and then I had all these things to where it's like the enemy was coming at me and saying, you're gonna lose your baby, you're gonna, get hurt, something's gonna happen to your baby. And all along, like, there's a reason why I felt him move so early, and that was because there was a battle coming, and there was a spiritual battle coming, and God wanted me to know that my baby was okay despite the circumstances going on outside of that, despite this placenta tear, despite the car accident that probably should have taken me out, despite just the craziness of even being able to get pregnant. And I felt him throughout most of my pregnancy, and he's here, and he's healthy, and he's happy, and he's cute and adorable, and his sisters love him, and he's just such a blessing. Even though he was unplanned, he's such... Unplanned does not mean unloved. Unplanned just means unexpected blessing, and he's perfect, and our family is complete, and we're excited. And well, again, thank you for being on this journey with me. I believe that this will probably be my last video that I film within the parameters of pregnancy. I mean, there is still a few things if you guys would like some more postpartum updates, or maybe some things specifically related to pregnancy from my experience. Again, I'm not a doctor, I can only speak from personal experience. But thank you for being on this journey with me, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and that bell button below, and I will see you in the next video. God bless, and bye guys.